oh boy. I was really excited about this one. I really wanted to like it. I love Arcane Season 1, and I had a lot of hope for Season 2. But I'll be honest right up front, this isn't the show we were looking for. The first season of Arcane is perhaps the best original show on Netflix, an example of video game adaptations done right. Arcane is based on a massive multiplayer battle arena game called League of Legends. Legends has a professional circuit with international tournaments and cash prizes nearing $500,000 for the first place winners. But the gameplay and tournaments aren't what most people find interesting about League of Legends. It's the world that the game takes place in, filled with rich lore, characters, and story, some of which have been showcased in a series of beautiful cinematic trailers. The studio behind many of those trailers is the French animation house Fortiche. Back in 2021, Riot Games and Fortiche partnered for a larger, far more ambitious project, a 9-episode TV series set in the world of League of Legends. Arcane did an extraordinary job of setting a story in the world of the video game, showing off some compelling character-driven narratives, strong dialogue with great voice performances, and some impressive animation. Not long after the first season was released, news came that Arcane would get a Season 2, and it's taken 3 years to finally release. And release it has, and we're going to dive in to determine if Season 2 can live up to the first season. Spoiler alert, it doesn't. After a stylized music video style recap of Season 1, the first episode picks up right where Season 1 ended, with the aftermath of Jinx's attack on Piltover's council chamber. First of all, Jace and Mel are alive. More than alive, they seem to have survived without so much as a scratch, though not everyone got off as easy. Robo-Guy Bolbach, Puzzle Guy Hoskell, and Caitlyn's mother Cassandra are all dead. The last two counselors, the Clockwork Necklace Lady, Shula, and the effeminate guy, Sallow, are injured but alive. Though of the survivors, the worst off is Victor. Jace rushes to find help for his friend who is near death. The only thing he finds is the Hex Core, which seems to merge with Victor. What it's doing for him or to him isn't immediately evident. And I'm going to pause here for a moment because this opening scene is delivered in a very strange way. We don't see the explosion of Jinx's rocket. We don't see what happened in the council chamber. We only see the aftermath. So at the moment, Jace and Mel getting out of this with barely a scratch feels like a massive case of plot armor. However, because of the way this is presented, I have hope that they will revisit this moment later and give us a better idea of what's happened, to add some detail or information that will explain how this played out. But we'll have to wait, because we jump into another stylized music video showing the funeral of Cassandra Kiriman, as well as how Caitlyn is dealing with a loss. While this sequence is beautifully rendered, it also feels like they are using it to speed through some character development that could have been handled better by giving it some more time. But as the montage ends, we see Caitlyn, with Mel and the surviving members of the council, standing in the ruins of the council chamber. The assembled are meeting to discuss how to respond to the attack. There are disagreements and wrangling, as some, like Sallow, want all-out war with the Undercity, while others insist that the attack was a single rogue individual.
She confirmed this was the act of a single deranged individual. Jinx.
Though due to the influence of Ambessa, the council sanctions sending an army of enforcers into Zaun, but without Hextech weapons. The strangest thing here is that Jace is noticeably absent. He isn't there because he hasn't left Victor's side, which makes a kind of sense. What doesn't make sense is that no one brings up his absence, questions why he's not there, or holds off on a vote of this magnitude while there's a council member absent.
Then it's settled. 2-1. We invade.
After this, we finally get a scene with Caitlyn and her father. They exchange a heartfelt moment in their shared grief, and the dad passes Caitlyn something from her mother, the Kiriman family key. And after the 10-minute mark, we finally get our first Vi-Caitlyn scene. Honestly, I'm not sure whether to praise them for their restraint or chide them from dragging it out. The burgeoning relationship between these two characters was a big piece of Season 1. It impacted both characters' assumptions and prejudices. Their connection helped each of them grow, as personal affection trumped the dehumanizing propaganda that each side held. So because of that, keeping them separated through these story beats feels a little off. After a moment of comfort, Caitlyn tells Vi of the Council's plan to invade Zaun.
They're sending all the enforcers after Jinx.
And right on the heels of that, she offers her a badge and a position with the enforcers. Vi doesn't take too kindly to that and harshly rejects it.
Kate, I can't wear this.
I watched them kill my parents.
The scene is painfully melodramatic. Caitlyn thinks this will help Vi prove she's a good Zaunite, while Vi still views the enforcers as the bad guys. They talk past each other instead of to each other, and both sides slip back into the kind of "I thought you were different" type of mentality. This scene ends with Vi leaving in a huff. I understand what they were trying to do with this, but I don't think it was executed well, and I don't like that they are so quickly trying to push a conflict that will drive a wedge between Caitlyn and Vi 12 minutes into the first episode. Next, Mel visits Jace, who is still keeping watch over Victor, who is now encased in some sort of hex core womb. Jace is struggling with a bit of survivor's guilt, as he tries to figure out how the explosions seem to spare some of them and not others. And hopefully this is another breadcrumb that will lead to later answers. They talk about what went down with the council, although there's still no mention about why Jace wasn't there. And then Mel tells Jace that Caitlin is hurting over the loss of her mother. So Jace goes to see her. We see that Caitlin is having visions of her mother and Jinx, which foretells her deteriorating mental state. But mainly the main point of this scene is to show that Jace is wavering about whether or not to make Hextech weapons. Caitlin is against it, but both are still unsure of what the best course of action is. We catch back up with Vi, who's been drinking with an enforcer in the streets of Piltover. They are approached by a couple of on-duty officers. One of the enforcers is named Maddie, who fangirls over Vi for a moment as she tells her how hard Caitlin fought to get her enlisted. Apparently, Vi has become an inspirational figure among the enforcers for the way she stood up against Silco. A little drunk and taken aback by Maddie's accolades, Vi doesn't have the heart to tell the girl that she said no to becoming an enforcer. But the conversation is interrupted by bells ringing out from the square, calling the citizens of the city to a public memorial for those killed by Jinx's attack. Vi follows the officers and others to the memorial, and as the scene progresses, you may start to get some Red Waiting vibes, especially when a guy in an enforcer uniform closes everyone in by shutting the doors. Sure enough, one of the guards is not a guard, and one of the mourners is not a mourner, but a Zonite who stages another attack. The fake guard fires off a signal flare, which signals the drop for more Shimmer attack drones. And there's a woman whose name I don't remember, though she's the mother of the kid Jace killed when they raided one of Silco's Shimmer factories in Season 1. So this woman is out for revenge, focusing all her efforts on killing Jace. And although they do get injured, none of our core cast is killed before Mama Medarda arrives with some of her Noxian soldiers. They quickly put down the attack drones, and Chainsaw Lady is killed by Ambessa. And I want to like this sequence, but there's something a bit off about it. The Shimmer drones make short work of a half a dozen officers in a matter of seconds, but are unable to deal a killing blow to any of our main cast despite having plenty of opportunities. For instance, Maddie, the enforcer we just met, is grabbed and hung upside down by a Goliath drone, but he doesn't seriously injure or kill her. Vi runs off to find and bring back Jace's hammer, which gives us a cool hero shot, but it doesn't match up with the Vi we know. Vi of the first season would be more likely to jump in fist first, instead of running off on a Hail Mary attempt while others fight and die, especially when Caitlin is in harm's way. So like other parts of this episode so far, our characters aren't acting in line with their established personalities. It's awkward, forced, and clumsy. In the aftermath, Vi and Caitlin have another contentious talk, and we see that Caitlin is being pushed further into a place where she sees all of Zon as the problem.
What kind of animals?
Now, I understand that the writers want us to believe that she's being radicalized into the pro-war side, but they are rushing it in a way that undermines her character growth in the first season. Then Caitlin breaks down again over her mother's death, and Vi tries to comfort her, and this feels strangely out of place given what we've just seen and the conversation we just had. This exchange would have worked far better in the previous scene between them, so even from a technical perspective, this episode is frustratingly put together. Caitlin uses the key thing her dad gave her, which unlocks a computer terminal with the Kierman family records. We don't get to see exactly what Caitlin does, but whatever it is, catalyzes her resolve. In the next scene, she barges into the council chamber and announces her plan to take a small strike team of enforcers into Zon to shut down any remnants of Silco's operation and to capture Jinx. This is another strange scene. Sallow starts to object to the intrusion of the council meeting, but Caitlin shuts him down.
I am a decorated officer, leader of House Kiraman. Address me with respect, or keep your mouth shut.
Wow, she's such a badass. Only this isn't even remotely true. Let's go back to the first season for a second. Caitlin is an enforcer, but her career is locked to her status as being a counselor's daughter, and she knows it. Her desire to buck against those restraints causes her to become insubordinate, often butting heads with leadership, and doing things that she's not supposed to do.
I realize you're used to getting your way, Kierman, but we have a chain of command for a reason.
Then in episode 4 of season 1, Caitlin is almost blown up in one of Jinx's attacks, which leads to this scene.
You almost died, Kate. I just want you to be safe.
Thanks, but I already have a job.
No, you don't. After the attack, your parents spoke to the sheriff.
So according to this, Caitlin isn't an enforcer anymore. At the very least, she's been taken off active duty and has lost her position. Then Caitlin goes rogue and embarks on a mission of her own. She BS's her way through getting Vi released out of prison so she can take her to the Undercity. After their escapades, they emerge back into Piltover. Caitlin's mother gets them an audience with the council, which leads to a falling out between Vi and Caitlin.
Oil and water. Wasn't meant to be.
And after a gratuitous shower scene, Caitlin is abducted by Jinx. This development leads us into the climax of season 1. Now, with that context, we can return to this scene in our current episode and see why Caitlin's statement is nonsense. Even though they've been playing her off as an officer, she shouldn't be. For all we know, Caitlin hasn't been reinstated, and she certainly hasn't received a commendation.
You understand you've broken several laws.
We don't even know if a new marshal has been appointed after Marcus was killed in episode 7. But never mind all that. The writers clearly don't care about their own established story, and they don't want us to care either. Instead, they want to give us a Caitlyn is a girl boss moment. Oh, and the problems with the scene don't end there. We see that Vi has changed her mind and has chosen to join the Enforcers. We don't get to see her make that decision, to see her wrestle with it. We don't know what finally convinced her or anything that would make this scene pay off. There is a way they could have gotten Vi to this moment, but it would have taken time and narrative work to make it believable. As it is, this is just an outright contradiction of her character.
Kate, I can't wear this.
And she's not the only one. Jace has changed his mind and has made a set of Hex-Tech weapons for this mission, including a new rifle for Caitlyn and gauntlets for Vi, contradicting himself in this very episode.
Mel, I promised Victor. Never again. Never again. Never again.
Again, there was a way they could have gotten Jace to this, or perhaps they could have introduced a new character, another Hex-Tech expert who defied Jace and made weapons behind his back. Just about anything would have been better than skipping all of that story and character work for the sake of expediency. As the first episode ends, we see Singed tracking a two-headed wolf through a snowy landscape, and that is episode 1. Arcane has really hit the ground running this season, pushing into the ever-evolving conflict between Piltover and Zahn. I like that they aren't wasting time, but I do think they're moving too quickly. I was hoping they might take a little more time in the wake of Jinx's attack, to catch up with our different characters and groups, before committing to more action. And I don't love the forced drama between Vi and Caitlyn. If this season is going to bring them together just to break them apart again, that will get old awfully fast. But I still think there's a lot of potential here, so let's keep going into episode 2. After being absent from the first episode, we finally catch up with Jinx. Our rogue vixen narrates her thoughts while she's floating underwater. She gives us an idea of how she's dealing with the loss of Silco as she gives her surrogate father a watery burial. It's an interesting artistic choice to start off on this quiet, introspective note for what is a very chaotic character. And of course, there are parallels here to episode 3 of season 1, in which Silco was floating in the water. In both cases, the purpose of these scenes is to ground the characters, to remind us of their humanity and give us a point of understanding for them. After this, there is a montage showing what happened to the Undercity after Silco's death. We catch a glimpse of the other crime bosses and the eruption of conflict between them as they rush to fill the power vacuum left by Silco's death. And we learn that Jinx hasn't been a part of this at all, though she does kill a bunch of goons to save a kid who's being pursued, an act that will have repercussions later on. Next, we meet one of those crime bosses, a Yordle who has mechanical limbs and likes to snort shimmer. This guy, whose name is Smeech, with his best Joe Pesci impression, orders his men to secure one of Silco's old buildings.
You go on ahead. Report back.
But the place is overrun by poison smog, and a violent threat we don't quite see. Then we jump to a meeting of the various kingpins, including Savika, who is calling for a truce, because their internecine warfare is distracting them from opposing Piltover. And I have to point something out here. While I think the scene does a decent job of showing how the power dynamic in Zahn has shifted, there is something absent here. There's no mention of the attack on the memorial ceremony, who was behind it, or why it was launched. Like the earlier scene with Piltover's council, when Jace's absence was overlooked, there is no one who acknowledges Chainsaw Lady isn't present. This feels like another oversight on the writer's part. It would have helped to have a little context for the events in the last episode, but without that, we're left to speculate on our own. Anyway, there's a disagreement among the gangsters over what to do about Jinx, whether they should hand her over to the topside authorities or not. For her part, Savika is against it,
We don't hand over our people.
but she is in the minority. After the meeting, we see Savika is trying to fix her mechanical arm without much success. She has a nice heart-to-heart with Jinx, which is strange since they couldn't stand each other before, but they bond over how lost they are about how to move forward without Silco.
All his plans. Everything we built. The hell we supposed to do now?
Leading Jinx to suggest that since everything is broken, they simply watch it all burn. Next, Victor awakens from his hex core wound. Most of his body has now been altered, like his arm and leg. Jace is enthusiastic to have his friend back, but Victor's body isn't the only thing that's changed. Victor doesn't quite seem like himself anymore.
What am I?
He is not happy that Jace used the hex core to save him. In fact, he believes that he should be dead.
I was supposed to die.
Jace isn't sure how to react to this, and is left stunned as Victor just walks out and leaves to strike out on his own. And I'm left stunned that Jace let him. This guy has the freaking hex core infused into his body. He could be a walking time bomb, and Jace just lets him walk out.
Hold up. Wait a minute. Something ain't right.
But we just cut away from that scene, and we get a chance to see what's happening with the regular people in the Undercity. It seems many of them have fled the lanes for the Firefly hideout. Echo and his friends have been doing their best to take in refugees, but there is of course a problem. The massive tree, which is the central pillar of their community, has been infected by something. To investigate, Heimerdinger and Echo sneak into Jace's laboratory, where they're confronted by Jace himself. And I know what you're thinking. This should be an amazing moment. This is the first time that Jace and Heimerdinger have met since Jace effectively stabbed his mentor in the back and got him kicked off the council. This is the first time Heimerdinger has been back to the academy since the attack. These two must have a lot to say to each other. Heimerdinger probably has a lot of righteous indignation and anger to express. Jace is probably desperate in need of his former mentor's guidance and wisdom. Of course, not before the mother of all I told you so's. Or they could just ignore all that, have them crack a couple of jokes about sneaking into the labs, and drink tea together.
We were attempting to sneak in. Oh, pish-posh, like you've never done it.
I honestly can't believe this scene didn't acknowledge the dangling plot threads from the previous season. It didn't give these characters or the audience the opportunity for the cathartic release they desperately need. Instead, this scene plays out so casually, it's as if the major events of the past 5 episodes never even happened at all. But anyway, after a few cups of tea, Jace proceeds to look at the leaf from the tree, and says it looks similar to the corruption that happened when they exposed plants to the Hex Core.
Where did you say you found this? Deep in the underground.
Questions arise over how the corruption could have reached all the way from Jace's lab to a tree in the Undercity. Questions that are soon brushed aside by another mystery.
Where's Victor?
Well, Victor's in the Undercity, following a phantom voice that is guiding him somewhere. Elsewhere, Jinx is in the old hideout, the one she and Vi used to use to lie low from the Enforcers. We don't immediately see what she's doing, but she's got something large bundled up in some cloth. Then the place is flooded with gas. Jinx hides in time to see a group of Enforcers, including one that looks like Vi, enter and search the place. Jinx has an opportunity to shoot Vi, but can't quite bring herself to pull the trigger. Instead, she activates the target shooting game to serve as a distraction so she can get away. The tension in this scene is fairly well played, but I do have a couple of problems with it. First is how little the gas seems to affect Jinx. Certainly we can say her shimmer-enhanced body has some special resiliences, but I don't know how much that accounts for, because the gas is clearly affecting her, just not enough to make much of a difference. The other problem is how Caitlyn and Vi's Enforcers managed to make it this deep into the Undercity without incident. Just having them show up here suddenly brings up a lot of questions, which in truth distracted me and took away from the impact the scene could have had. Again, I feel like the writers are sacrificing storytelling for expediency. But Jinx does get away, only to be attacked by Smeech and his men. Hampered by the effects of the gas, Jinx is caught and restrained. But Savika shows up just in time to lend a hand, pun intended. Jinx tosses her mystery package to Savika, and it turns out to be a new mechanical arm built from parts of the machines in the old hideout. Cue another signature Arcane fight scene, which has Savika make short work of Smeech. It's a rather baffling sequence that doesn't live up to the fight scenes in Season 1, though it does have a high level of jaw-dropping animation. And I am disappointed with the conclusion. The fight scene ends with Smeech dead. It would have been nice if they hadn't tossed him aside so quickly. I mean, think about all the times we thought Savika was done for, only to have her come back. Anyway, we're back with Victor, who's still following his phantom, though he is also being followed by some Shimmer wretches. They think they might be able to rob Victor for stuff to sell for more Shimmer, but Victor seems to have pity on them. He reaches out and lays hand on one of them, Hutch. There's an explosion of magic and power, as Hutch is changed, healed from the legions that affected his body from his Shimmer addiction. The other wretches all fall to their knees and bow before Victor, as he sees a vision of his old research assistant Sky smiling at him. Victor tells the men that they don't have to be afraid anymore.
You need not suffer anymore.
Just before the credits roll, we see that Singe is still working on something nefarious, including keeping a large beating heart on his work table, as it's pumped full of some kind of green liquid. Creepy. And that is the end of episode 2. Things are moving ahead at a pretty brisk pace. A little too brisk for my taste. I'm going to reserve my full thoughts for the end of this video, so let's keep going into the final episode of Part 1. Episode 3 starts by backing up a little bit to fill us in on some information concerning things we saw in the last episode. We see Caitlyn gaining access to the Kierman family records, and this time we do get to see what she saw. Apparently it was Caitlyn's family who built the ventilation system in the underground, which helped clear out much of the industrial smog called the Grey. This means that Caitlyn now has the ability to control those systems, and what follows is another music video sequence which shows Caitlyn, Vi, and their shock troopers flooding areas of the lanes with the Grey to clear the streets and make short work of the resistance. This answers how they were able to arrive at the hideout in the last episode. So it is nice to have some additional context for all this, but I'm not a fan of the way the show is brute forcing a tone for the story exposition through these sequences. At this point, it's clear that the people making Arcane took the reaction to the Echo Jinx fight in Season 1 and decided to use it as a blueprint for approaching Season 2. But Season 1 used sequences like this to enhance the character and storytelling. It doesn't work so well when they're used as a replacement for it. These music video scenes are rendered with amazing animation, and it's clear they took a lot of time on them. But they don't replace well-paced story beats told through well-written character interactions and dialogue. They also prove you can have too much of a good thing. Anyway, the sequence ends as the Enforcers find one of Smeech's men tied upside down to a ventilation duct. As the crew moves in, eviscerated effigies drop from the ceiling, one for each member of Caitlyn's squad. Spooky. Next, the Enforcers are checking out the gangster, Hinot, while questioning him. Caitlyn gets aggressive with the guy, sparking a show of concern from Vi. And again, this is just strange. Vi is usually the aggressive one, especially towards the Chem Barons and those who work for them. It seems to some degree like the writers have swapped Vi and Caitlyn's personalities to facilitate what they want to do later on, and it's making things feel off. Not to mention the fact that these guys just gasp parts of the Undercity for expediency, but get concerned when Caitlyn uses some mean words. But anyway, Hinot doesn't need much motivation and confesses that Jinx is up to something big.
She's planning something big right here in the pipeworks. She was headed towards the old tunnels. Something about rerouting the vents.
And I'm not sure how he knows this, unless Jinx told him and left him there so he could guide the enforcers to her, which is perfectly possible, if very convenient. Having what she needs, Caitlyn places Hinot under arrest and tells the crew to gear up to go after Jinx. But Vi wants a word in private. The two go off somewhere out of earshot of the others, and Vi explains that she wants the two of them to go after Jinx alone. She's worried about the others' safety and wants to minimize the risk.
She'll smell their nerves a mile away and find a way to use them against us.
Vi says she believes her sister is gone, and Jinx is all that remains.
Everyone in my life has changed. Promise me you won't change.
What now? First of all, from what we've seen, Caitlyn has already changed rather significantly from the Caitlyn we knew in the first season. But leaving that aside, this line makes no sense. Powder becoming Jinx is really the only person in Vi's life that has changed in any significant way. Most of the people she was close to have died or left her, so the line should be about how she's lost everyone she's cared about, and now she's scared of losing Caitlyn as well. This would not only fit better what we've seen, but would also help to develop Vi's abandonment issues, which she would have after losing her parents, her surrogate family, and her sister, so I don't understand this dialogue choice. The only reason is, of course, that we are about to see people change more than they already have. And while that works as an awkward, clumsy setup, it doesn't really connect with anything that's come before it. But anyway, this moment of vulnerability from Vi is enough to prompt Caitlyn into action, and we get the one kiss scene shippers have been waiting for. Yes, Vi and Caitlyn kiss, and make out. Yes, they've teased it, and yes, we knew it was coming. But like much of everything else in Season 2, it doesn't feel earned. It is forced and shoehorned in because narrative tropes dictate that if we finally have these two physically affirm their romantic interest in one another, something is about to happen to force them apart. More than tropes, the opening sequence foretells this as we see the silhouettes of Caitlyn and Vi push away from each other. So we know what's on the horizon, and if the writer's lack of restraint is any indication, we will likely see it happen in this very episode. But first we see Maddie and the enforcer with no name escort Hinot back out of the ducts, leaving Vi and Caitlyn to go on alone. Elsewhere we see Mbessa is meeting with Amara, a member of the Merchant Guild, who we last saw in episode 5 of Season 1. Amara was one of the people Jace met with in the Opera House as he began to make deals to gain influence. Here we find that she's asked for an audience with Mbessa, but the meeting quickly turns because Amara isn't quite herself. It seems she's being puppeteered by a malevolent force. Mbessa's enemy from Noxus has finally found her. Remember, Mbessa came to Piltover in Season 1 because a rival family had killed Mel's brother. Mbessa essentially fled to Piltover, hoping a weaponized version of Hextech could give her an advantage in this violent feud that threatened her family. Whoever this group is, it has tracked Mbessa down and is using a guild merchant to deliver a message. But Mbessa leaps into action and runs the woman through with her sword, killing Amara, but also severing the link to whoever was controlling her. Now Mbessa has two more problems. Her enemy is closing in again, and she has a murdered guild merchant in her chambers. Another jump, and we're with Counselor Sallow, who is in a pleasure house. A woman is applying some kind of ink to the designs on Sallow's legs. The ink is apparently made of shimmer, as evidenced by the color and by the shimmer that flashes through Sallow's eyes as it's being applied. But the vixen working on Sallow gets spooked when she hears someone coming, and a moment later, Mbessa barges in. The vixen is dismissed, and Mbessa has a confrontational conversation with Sallow. They fuss over the lack of progress concerning Caitlyn's strike team, but Sallow mentions that success or failure doesn't mean much because the Kierman name holds so much power in Piltover.
It's not the girl. It's the name. It bewitches people.
And this statement provokes an interesting reaction from Mbessa. Interesting on a second watch through, that is. It's so subtle that I didn't catch it the first time, and I point it out here because it's one of the only hints at a major plot twist that's coming at the end of this episode. Mbessa tells Sallow to assemble every person in the house with even a little bit of influence in the city, because they have something to discuss. Next, we jump over to the Opera House, where Mel is meeting with the vixen lady who is working on Sallow. We learn that her name is Lest, and she's actually been working for Mel. But the encounter with Mbessa has shaken her up. After some pleading, Mel learns that her mother is planning some sort of coup to place Sallow as leader over the council and over the city, so in effect, Mbessa will have control over the city. Lest mentions that Mel's mother may act tough, but underneath, she's scared of something. Back with Jace, Echo, and Heimerdinger, Jace explains how his Hextech interacts with the Arcane, and the three together hypothesize that whatever's happening to Echo's tree may be a result of the Arcane pushing back.
So you're telling me that pattern is on my tree because you pissed the Arcane off with all your demands?
Before we can explore that anymore, we jump back to Mel and her assistant. The assistant confirms that Sallow is organizing a meeting with all the nobles in Piltover for something big. We also learn that Mbessa's rival has somehow seized most of the Merdarda's financial holdings, meaning Mbessa is on the run, near destitute, and desperate, which makes her extremely dangerous. Then we get a complicated sequence that cuts back and forth between Vi and Caitlyn and Jace's group, So I'm going to summarize this the best I can without making the jumping back and forth too confusing. Jace and the others take a long elevator ride down to the depths beneath Piltover. Jace explains that the Hextech gates extend deep into the earth, and acts as the channel which focuses the arcane energy into a beam which makes the transportation system work. Even though much of the structure exists above ground, the heart of it goes deep underground because Jace was afraid of what might happen if there was ever an overload. Echo doesn't appreciate the idea that Piltover put a potential bomb so close to his home.
So instead of it exploding in your neighborhood, it would blow up in ours.
Which also doesn't make sense when you consider Jace and Victor are the ones who built it. Doesn't sound like something they would do either. But anyway, any potential animosity this might bring up is quickly diffused, because there's something not quite right with the chamber they enter. There are more signs of the veiny corruption, and all of a sudden the three are pulled into an empty white void. Empty except for an evil-looking orb thing, which carries a similar look to the corruption that we've already seen. Intercut with this, Vi and Caitlin make their way into a large open hall deep in the bowels of the ventilation system. Where this is, or how exactly they got there, I have no idea, but it's quickly evident that this is Jinx's lair. Chalk drawings adorn the pillars on the sides of the room, telling Jinx's story. Knowing what they're about to face, Vi tells Caitlin that if she has an opening, she should take a shot.
If you see an opening, take the shot.
Now remember this because it'll be important in a few minutes. Vi moves deeper into the chamber, while Caitlin sets up her rifle. Vi calls out to Jinx, who seems surprised that they have found her.
Guess there really isn't a crack in the earth where you won't find me.
But she also seems very prepared, so I'm not sure how to square that. The sisters quip at each other about how they've changed, playing the game of who's done more wrong.
You've turned a leaf, sister.
I'm done blaming myself for your mistakes.
None of this is very well written or engaging, and it really doesn't matter. Caitlin sees Jinx and takes a shot, which is played up, except it's rather obvious that isn't really Jinx, but a reflection. But then Jinx appears on a pillar behind Vi, Caitlin tries to get a shot in, and she's jumped by Savika, so they were definitely expecting Vi and Caitlin to show up. But anyway, Vi and Jinx fight while Caitlin and Savika fight to yet another song. In the Netherrealm, Jace makes a truly baffling decision to reach out and touch the evil orb thing, which causes it to react. Suddenly, all the Hextech weapons start glitching out. Jace's hammer, Vi's gauntlets, Caitlin's rifle, and even Jake's shark rocket launcher all behave erratically. We hear Jace's inner thoughts questioning what they've done.
What have we done?
And again, for some reason that I can't explain, he tries to smash the evil orb with his hammer. More crazy glitching occurs with the Hextech stuff. Something like an electrical charge jumps from Caitlin's rifle to Savika, which incapacitates her for a moment. That allows Caitlin to get a shot off on Jinx, which blasts off the middle finger of her left hand. Vi uses this moment to get on top of Jinx and prepares to deliver a killing blow, and Jinx resigns herself to it, prepared to give her sister the win. But Vi hesitates for a moment, long enough for the kid to rush in. She grabs Jinx's pistol and points it at Vi while she covers Jinx's body with her own. The tense moment hangs before Caitlin shoots the gun out of the kid's hand. In response, the kid hugs Jinx, acting like a human shield. Vi's bloodlust has been broken, but Caitlin's has not. Our sniper tries to line up another shot on Jinx when Vi tries to stop her, worried about the kid covering Jinx. And again, we have two characters swap in how they should be acting. Remember in the first season, an innocent kid was caught in the crossfire when Jace and Vi raided one of Silco's hideouts. This accidental death broke Jace's will to fight the Undercity, but Vi was undeterred. She said a lot of kids had died because of Silco, and made the case that more death would be the cost of putting an end to it.
One dead kid? There's hundreds more where he came from, thanks to Silco and thanks to people like you who stuck their heads in the dirt.
This situation isn't that much different. At least not different enough to swing Vi into the opposite stance she had then. Much like Caitlin had been opposed to collateral damage and harming innocents, now she doesn't seem to care. Too consumed by her hate for Jinx, she's willing to gas citizens and shoot at kids. Anyway, Caitlin isn't listening to Vi, insisting that she won't let Jinx escape again.
She's not getting away again!
As if the only options were to let her go or kill her in cold blood. Again, the dialogue choices here don't work. Caitlin shoots one of Vi's gauntlets, and then takes another shot, and for just a moment they want us to believe that Caitlin has shot Vi. But Vi somehow managed to grab and deflect the barrel of the rifle. Before any of that can register, Savika has gotten back on her feet, and trips something inside a panel on the wall. There's an explosion, which releases a torrent of wind and gray. Vi and Caitlin are blown out of the chamber while Jinx and Savika and the kid are able to take cover from the tempest. The force of air and gray rushes through the ventilation system as more fans kick on, accelerating it, along with some colored dyes. The toxic mixture thunders to the surface where it explodes from vents all over Piltover, covering the city in a brightly colored smog. Underground, Vi and Caitlin are fine, but the passage back to the main chamber has collapsed, which means there's no way to get back and capture Jinx and company. Vi tries to reason with Caitlin, voicing her concern over how far she's willing to go.
I was a kid. What have you missed?
But Caitlin accuses Vi of being just like her sister.
I keep telling myself that you're different. But you're not. It's her blood in your veins.
Vi turns that around and accuses Caitlin of being the one acting like Jinx, which earns her a rifle butt to her solar plexus. Apparently, whatever affection these two had for each other is gone just like that, because Caitlin leaves Vi doubled over and in pain. And I don't have too much more to say about this. It is painfully contrived. forced, and inconsistent with who these characters should be. It's happened because it's how the writers wanted it to go down. There's no sense to any of it. So moving on, Piltover is dealing with the aftermath of the attack. Mel prepares to make the only play she can, to use the information she has to prevent her mother from taking power. But before Mel can leave her office, our Black Rose nemesis returns. Mel and her assistant get sucked into a black, thorny void and disappear. Finally, we see the big meeting, because somehow Salo managed to get a meeting with all the important leaders of the city in a matter of hours. Mbessa addresses the assembled and uses the most recent Grey attack as fodder to push for an all-out assault on Zahn. She goes on to recommend that they elect a single leader to lead the effort, one person who everyone could rally around.
Appoint a general to lead until this threat is vanquished.
Now Salo thinks that he's the leader she's talking about, and the show wants us to believe that it's Salo. So the scene turns on what the writers think is a shocking reveal.
Caitlin Kierman.
Some of the assembled are shocked, but Mbessa and her soldiers start to pound their chests to show support. The action catches on until the whole room becomes unified, and just like that, Caitlin becomes the new leader of the military and is secured as Mbessa's puppet. And this isn't all that well set up. Mbessa shared all of 2 scenes with Caitlin, and the two haven't even spoken to one another. But again, that doesn't matter, because this is obviously what the first 3 episodes have been building toward. Before we dip out, there is a little flashback in the sequence. 2 actually. We see Mbessa's right-hand man approaching Chainsaw Lady. Then we see the moment Mbessa killed Chainsaw Lady.
It's you!
So we find out the attack on the memorial was facilitated by Mbessa. She has been manipulating all of this to push the conflict so that she can achieve her desired outcome. As this episode ends, we have another vignette with Singed. Our mad scientist has hooked himself up to a couple large tanks and is circulating his blood into one of them, infusing it with something. And they're really playing this up as a mystery. And I guess it is if you haven't watched any of the trailers and have zero connection to the online sphere surrounding the show. Because if you have done either of those things, you know that Singed's project is Warwick, a mutant amalgamation of the wolf we saw earlier, and Vander, who actually isn't dead. Spoiler alert. And that is episode 3. And that is the end of Arcane Season 2 Part 1. Unfortunately, this is far, far from the excellence of Season 1. Season 1 worked as well as it did because it focused on character-driven drama, which supported and drove the narrative. Season 2 does not have this. The characters have been fundamentally altered from who they were before, changed so they can be pushed from scene to scene, saying and doing things so the next thing can happen. More than unmotivated, they have very purposely skipped or left out every single scene or moment that could have served as connective tissue. There are so many missing interactions and character beats that I can't help but wonder if the writers don't care about these characters at all. They are used for a purpose. They are plot devices, devoid of humanity. And that's what really hurts the most so far. All the wasted potential, all the possibility that has been thrown away for this. And no, it does not get better in Part 2, which I will get to. Just hang in there for me. Anyway, remember this is all just one Rebel's opinion. What do you think of Arcane Season 2? Do you like it? Do you hate it? Let me know in the comments. Like the video and subscribe to the channel so you'll get all the updates from Rebel Normal.